court is now in session. For this morning session, the Chamber will continue to hear the testimony of the witness who will be questioned by the prosecution and then by the lead co-lawyers for civil parties. The Chamber would also like to notify the parties that today Judge Cartwright is available and she returns to the bench. Before I hand the floor to the prosecution, the greffier, could you report the attendance of the parties and individuals to the proceeding? The interpreter cannot hear. Greffier, Mr. President, all parties to the proceeding are present except the accused Ieng Sari, who is present in the holding cell downstairs. He requests to waive his direct presence through his counsel in today's proceeding. The letter of waiver by the accused has been submitted to the greffier. Thank you. President, thank you. The Chamber will now decide the request made by Ieng Sari. The Chamber received the request by Ieng Sari dated 4 September 2012 through his counsel to waive his direct presence in the courtroom and instead request to follow the proceedings through a remote means from the holding cell downstairs for today's proceeding. So Sam, the treating doctor of the accused at the ECCC detention facility, has examined Mr. Ieng Sari this morning and observed that Mr. Ieng Sari feels dizziness, fatigue, and cannot sit for long due to his backache, and recommends that the Chamber shall authorize him to follow the proceeding through a remote means from the holding cell downstairs. And as Mr. Ieng Sari himself requests to waive his direct presence in the courtroom due to his health and as observed by the treating doctor, but that he is fit physically and mentally to follow it through a remote means from the holding cell downstairs, and that he could communicate with his defense team directly, the Chamber grants the request. So that he can follow the proceedings through the holding cell downstairs through a visual audio and visual means for the whole day proceeding. A video unit you instructed to link the proceeding to the holding cell downstairs. Mr. Nong Sapong, we was notified that this morning you are not feeling well due to your high blood pressure. Is that correct? Response: yes, that is correct, Mr. President. President, thank you, and we thank you for your commitment to testify as scheduled by the Chamber. During this morning proceeding, if at any time that you feel you are not well, please notify the Chamber immediately by raising your hand. Either we will allow you to rest or to adjourn the hearing depending on the situation. Witness, thank you. President, the floor is now given to the prosecution. You may proceed.
Good morning, Mr. President. Good morning, Your Honours. Good morning, Counsel. And good morning to you, Mr. Non Sapang. In this final stage of my examination, I want to go through a few more documents, and the first of the documents are 2 telegrams, and that they are the final telegrams that we will be looking at. Your Honours, the first document is document E3/1077. It was attached to the witness's first interview. I have a hard copy for the witness, and with your permission, we will also project it on the screen for everyone to see.
Yes, you may proceed. Court officer, could you deliver the hard copy document from the prosecution for the witness examination?
Thank you, Your Honour. Mr. Non Sapang, by way of introduction, and for everyone else concerned, this is a slightly longer document. It's dated the 10th of April 1978, and it is entitled Telegram 324, addressed to, respectfully sent to beloved Committee 870. If we can start, Mr. Non Sapang, by looking at the final page for a brief moment, at the end of the document, the sign-off line below the date, 10 April 1978, we see a name, Say. Do you recall who that individual was?
No, I do not know this person.
Below the name and the line indicating date of receipt, being the 11th of April 1978, we see Grand Uncle Norn, Grand Uncle Van, Grand Uncle Vaughan, Office and Archive. This is the copied to line that we've discussed a number of times with other documents. On the first page, however, we also see an annotation in the top left-hand corner, which is translated in English as Uncle Norn. Do you see that annotation, and do you read it as saying Uncle Norn?
Yes, I see that annotation as you read out.
Are you able to identify this particular handwriting?
I'd like to request you to read the statements that I made with the investigators from the Office of the Co-Investigating Judges.
I'm sorry, in this case, there is no detailed discussion in the written summary that we have in your statement in relation to this document. If you're not sure, that is fine. That can be your response. If you're not quite sure whose handwriting that is, then that is fine. Pardon?
Thank you.
Just looking briefly at the contents on the first page in all three language versions, and we've put a square around this paragraph, Mr. Sopang. Prior to that, the document discusses the situation along the border with Thailand and Laos, and then in that box we have the following quote: "The base of these traitors is on Dangrek Mountain. We have a plan to search and destroy it. Our Intam group previously used the traitors in Sector 103, whose leader was Ah Hong. He was their supporter. But after we arrested Hong and all of his henchmen in Cham San district and in Sector 103 military unit, In Tam group has no more support." Just looking at that name, Hong, from Sector 103, is that the same Hong from Sector 103 that we've discussed over the last couple of days, a gentleman who was a secretary of that sector?
Yes, this Hong is the same person.
Thank you very much. I will show you another telegram from the same location and see whether you're familiar with it. And this is the final telegram. Your Honours, this is document E3/918. It is a telegram dated the 10th of January 1978. And again, I have a hard copy for the witness, and we have it ready to project on the screen with your permission.
Yes, you may proceed.
Again, this document is copied to Uncle Nuon, Brother Van, Brother Vaughan, Brother Q, Office and Archive. It's addressed to respected and beloved 870 Committee. Just looking at that document, Mr. Sopang, was this a telegram that you recall translating during the period, in this case in 1978? Is this one of the ones that went through your office?
I recall that it was a newly established zone after the autonomous zone in Siem Reap, Previhir, was removed and named as Zone 801. I and my team used to decode messages from that zone.
If we can just look at one paragraph in particular. This is the second last paragraph, and the relevant ERNs are in Khmer 00001061 to 62, French 00001062 64725 and English 00182 we see a discussion of a study session that proceeds as follows, quote, according to the presentation of comrades from the commune during the study session, it made known that this year in Praia Vihia sector, in the majority of places, there is starvation because there were only large quantity of transplantation but no quality, which was as a result of poor harvest. Can I ask you first on this paragraph, do you recall contents or information such as this being communicated from the New North Zone about shortages and a poor harvest?
The telegram that I have in my hand does not seem to have that portion that you read out, because on the telegram that I have, it is sent to the 870 office, committee rather, and it's rather different from what you read out earlier.
It may be because I was reading from a different section to that you were looking at. If the court officer could assist, in Khmer this should be a paragraph starting at the bottom of the second page and then continuing on to the third page. Perhaps if we can just clarify that to make sure we have the right document. So that paragraph should start, in English at least, it starts with, the cattle was also destroyed a lot by the fact, etc., etc. And then when you look over the page, it continues to discuss the shortages that I was just discussing. I'm informed by the court officer that the documents correspond. But in order not to waste too much time, let me just ask you more generally, do you recall reports such as this one from the New North Zone about shortages of food that people were experiencing?
I saw in the previous telegrams about the increase in the production, but in this instance there is a shortage of the rice production. And as a result, the shortages could occur in certain areas, and in this instance it was in Praia Vihia sector.
Thank you. We'll leave that document and conclude our examination of the telegrams. I just want to ask you one or two final questions on telegrams more generally. Over the past few days, we've looked at a number of telegrams that you've examined. From your experience, working with these documents from 75 to 79, do these documents appear as genuine documents that were produced during the democratic Kampuchea period?
The telegrams that I have examined and seen during these few days proceeding before this court indeed reflect the telegrams that my group and I decoded. There was one exception only, that was the telegram sent through M81, which I never saw at the time, and my group did not decode that telegram. As for the rest, and it is my observation, they are the telegrams that my group and I decoded.
Thank you. That concludes our discussion of telegrams. I'll move on to another issue, which hopefully we can also deal with quickly. Your Honours, yesterday I sought to introduce or read to the witness from a FIBIS transcript, and this was one of the documents that had not been placed on the interface. We were directed to inform the parties of which documents we wished to use, and we have now done that. So this is one of those documents. It is E3/118. It's a section of the April 1975 FIBIS, and this section is dated the 17th of April 1975. As I indicated yesterday, we don't have a Khmer and French version, although we have requested translations. With your leave, what I would propose to do is simply read a brief excerpt from this and see whether the witness recognises it, given that it reports the victory of the 17th of April and contains possibly a message which the witness helped prepare for broadcasting.
Yes, you may do so.
This is at ERN 00166-976. And by way of introduction, Mr. Nonsapang, on the 29th of August, you described to us how a message was transmitted in the morning of the 17th of April. It was not a secret message. You were asked to prepare to translate it into written language for broadcasting. I want to read this transcript and see whether you recall that as being the message that you helped prepare. It is a broadcast by the voice of the National United Front of Kampuchea. It's addressed to it is in Khmer. It was in Khmer. On the 17th of April 1975. And this is what the text says. Quote, "Special news. We have completely liberated Phnom Penh. In the morning of 17 April 1975, at 9:30, we completely liberated Phnom Penh." Moving on to the next paragraph. "On the northern front, we stormed in from the head of the Troy Changwa Bridge and captured and occupied Wat Phnom on the morning of 17 April. We then advanced forward and occupied both the new and old central markets. On the northwestern front, on the night of 16 April, we occupied all of Tol Kok. In the morning of 17 April, we vigorously pressed forward and occupied the entire Phnom Penh railway station and all of the ministerial area south of the railway station. And then it continues to describe the capture of the rest of the city. From what I've read thus far, Mr. Sopang, does this text correspond with the message that you received on the 17th of April and which was then broadcast?
Yes, it was the same message.
Thank you. Can I ask you whether you recall who sent that message to you?
Response. It was Mr. Pon's group, the group who were in the battlefields, who then sent these messages to me and our group at the rear so that the messages could be prepared for radio broadcasts.
And apart from this message of the 17th of April, did you receive any additional messages for public broadcasting in the days following the 17th of April?
Response. No, there was none. The message appeared to be the same, and it was on the radio for a few days.
Thank you. And one final broadcast, I want to return back a little bit in time to February 1975 and see whether you recognize this broadcast. Your Honours, this is document E3/117. It is the February 1975 FIBIS. The section which I wish to refer to can be found in Khmer at 00242308, in French at 00281432, and in English at 00166772. I have a hard copy, but given that it's a broadcast, you may not wish to give a hard copy to the witness. I'm happy to read or proceed as you prefer, Mr. President.
The President, you may proceed. Court officer is now instructed to take the hard copy of the document from Mr. Co-Prosecutor to the witness.
Mr. Sopang, this is a translation into Khmer, so it is not a Democratic Kampuchea document or a document from 1975, but rather it's another transcript of a radio broadcast, and I just want to see whether you recall this broadcast or not. It is again by the voice of the National United Front of Kampuchea. It's dated the 26th of February 1975, and it is a text of a 26th February press communique on the 24 to 25 February 2nd session of the National Congress, held by representatives of the National United Front for Kampuchea and other organizations. At paragraph 1, it says the following, quote, "Concerning the 7 traitors in Phnom Penh, the National Congress has decided as follows. Traitors Lon Nol Sirik Matak, Sonyok Tan, Cheng Hang, Intam, Longbore, and Sostene Fernandez are the chieftains of the traitors and ringleaders of the treacherous anti-national coup d'etat which overthrew the independence, peace and neutrality of Cambodia." And a little bit further down, on behalf of the National United Front for Kampuchea, the Royal Government of the National Union of Kampuchea, and the Cambodian People's National Liberation Armed Forces, the National Congress declares it absolutely necessary to kill these 7 traitors for their treason against the nation. And I'll stop there. Do you recall this particular broadcast, Mr. Nonsapang, which is dated 26th of February 1975?
Response: no, I don't. Because at that time, I did not even have a radio to listen to the radio broadcasts. And on top of that, I did not know when or where the National Assembly or Congress was being held.
Thank you for clarifying that. We will move on. And I wish to discuss with you another document which is attached to your statements. Your Honours, this is document D200/9.12. It is a chart which was prepared by the witness and then attached to his OCIJ interview. With your permission, we have a hard copy and we're ready to display it on the screen as well.
The President, you may proceed.
I'm going to ask the AV units to keep this document on the screen, if possible, a little bit longer, so we can, so everybody has a reference to the items we're discussing. What we see is a chart which has 4 rectangles at the top. One is 870 K1, the next one is 870 K1 with Pol Pot in brackets, then the next one to the right is President of the State Presidium Khieu Samphan, and then to the far right, People Representative Assembly Nuon Chea. Did I read those sections of the chart correctly?
Response: yes, you did.
Now, the first section of the diagram on the left-hand side, below 870-K1, we have a circle, and in it telecommunication with names Pon, Pang, and Yo. Do I understand correctly that the Pang in the middle is a reference to yourself?
Response: yes, it is me. I am Nong Sapang.
Thank you. And where we see arrows from that circle on the left-hand side, arrows pointing down towards zones and autonomous sectors, and also pointing back from those zones and sectors to the telecommunication unit. Do I understand correctly that's a description of the communication as it was in 1975 to 1979?
Response: yes, it is correct. It was the communication that made through the telegrams from the top down and from bottoms up. And so far as I remember, there could have been one more zone 801 as well, and there could have been other new communication lines by 8 of 1978, because at that time there was a line of communication directly from a navy and from the port at the Kampong Sam and from the fishery, and another group stationed in Arany location that had to report or communicate directly all the way to the center. And indeed, having looked at this chart, I knew that it is not an exhaustive one yet, because after 1978 there were more lines of communications established.
Thank you for your comprehensive description of that structure. Staying with the left-hand side of the chart, we see a number of, again, rectangles at the bottom of the left-hand side of the chart, and we see from top to bottom we have sector, district, commune, and village, and we see arrows pointing in both directions between those bodies, and then up to the zone, and then up to the telecommunication unit. What were you illustrating with that part of the chart?
Response: I was just telling about the communications between the zones, villages, sub-districts, that the line of communication could not be made directly to the telecommunication section, because their messages could have gone through the zones first. In other words, we can say that the zones were in charge of preparing the messages that were coming to them before they could be forwarded to the upper echelon, because the messages from the villages or communes could never go all the way directly to the central. And at each zone, the same system was applied, and no one could report directly to the center except 3 autonomous zones in Siem Reap, Odaminchai, and Mondulkiri. These three particular autonomous zones were tasked with the authority to report directly to the center of the telecommunication section.
I think we may have a slight translation issue, so I want to just confirm. Those last three regions that you described, in English it was said that they were autonomous zones. Is that what you meant, that they were autonomous zones?
Response. The autonomous zones refer to the independent sector that was not under any supervision by the zone. So by that I mean these sectors, or autonomous sectors, could report directly all the way to the central committee without going through other zone. So the other channel, this is the authority invested in these sectors.
Thank you for clarifying that. Now, returning to the chart and moving to the right now, to the right of the telecommunication circle, we see another circle which is entitled S71 with the names Pong, Pum and Ken. And in your statement, E3/67 at Khmer ERN 002945538, French 0037495, and English 0048396, you described that office as follows. Under the guidance of the Committee 870, there was S71, which was a unit under the guidance of 870 with Pong as chairman, Pum as deputy chairman, and Ken as member-in-chief of security unit at K1. Surrounding S71 were officers K7, K8, K12, K18. Many other Ks surrounded S71. The K network around Pong and all these Ks were under the direct guidance of the party centre. Pol Pot was party secretary and chairman of Committee 870. No one used the term chairman of Office 870. The telegrams were usually designated as 870, i.e. the Central Committee. Does that summarize accurately the description that you gave to the investigators?
Response. I wish to emphasize that it is not S21. It could have been S71. And this unit is under the supervision of 870 committee. And I already discussed concerning the offices surrounding S71 and also the committee member of S71, and it is correct as what you indicated concerning this committee.
Thank you very much. It may have been an interpretation error, or I may have misspoke. I want to make sure we are discussing S71, not S21. And just to recap, S71, a unit led by Pong, was under the 870 committee or the Central Committee. Is that an accurate description of what the chart shows?
Response: yes, it is correct.
Thank you. Now, if we look back at the chart and look at the rectangles on top, we have above S71, we have 870 committee, and to the right of that, we see President of State Presidium, Mr. Khieu Samphan, and below the Presidium, we see listed a number of ministries. And then to the right, of course, we see another rectangle up the top, People's Representative Assembly with Mr. Nguyen Chair. In the interest of time, I just want to read your description of the rest of that chart and see whether you can confirm that for us, or if you want to add or correct. This continues from the previous section in Statement E3/67, and it reads as follows. Under the leadership of the Centre, there were various ministries, and these ministries were also under the Presidium of State, with Mr. Khieu Samphan as chairman. As far as I can remember, under the leadership of the party, as well as the state, at that time were the Ministry of Propaganda, and then I'll stop there because a number of ministries are listed. I'll stop there in the interest of time. A little bit below, as for the Ministry of Defence, it was apart from these ministries. It was under the party centre and was led by Mr. Son Sen. A little bit further down, the state and the party had to meet and communicate. In fact, everything was under the leadership of the party. Is that a correct summary up to now of how you described those relationships?
Response: yes, it is. I wrote it. However, there's still some correction that I also wish to make, in particular when it comes to the industry and railway station. Then Won Wait should be the person in charge of this ministry. Won Wait should not be the one who chair the Ministry of Economic and Finance. It's my mistake. The Ministry of National Defense was headed by His Excellency Son Sen, who was the Commander-in-Chief, and there were several divisions under this ministry, including the Air Force. And these sections did not report directly to my telecommunication section. And as I indicated, only the Navy, led by Mr. Mut, who had direct contact to the telecommunication. I wish to add this to make sure that things are clarified and that we understand the sketches I made.
I'm very grateful to you for providing those clarifications to us so that we understand fully. If I return to the section I was reading from, another brief passage, continuing from the last passage. And the Presidium of State was the state part, in brackets, now it is called the government, and also there was the People's Assembly. The People's Assembly was led by Mr. Nguyen Chair as chairman, in brackets, now we say People's Representatives. At that time, the party led them all. They all were under the party. Even the assembly was under the party. The party was Committee 870. And the final sentence below that, Committee 870 referred to the Central Committee with Mr. Pol Pot, Nunchia, Yingsari, and other senior leaders. And S71 was a small unit of the party centre, which did not have rights to cover the various ministries and did not have rights over the army. And I'll stop there. Is that also an accurate summary of your description of these bodies?
Response. Yes, it is correct. That's what I stated before the co-investigators.
And are those descriptions based on your experience and knowledge gained working during the Democratic Kampuchea period, things that you learned over the years as you worked in your unit and communicated with others around you?
Response. According to the experience living through the Democratic Kampuchea regime, everything was managed by the party. So party was the supreme body with the highest authority. Even the state presidium, the People's Representative Assembly, all which were the key institutions in the CPK regime, were all under the supervision and the power of supervision of Committee 870. This is what I have heard, I have learned and experienced during the regime. My understanding is that no one was above the party, no one was above Committee 870, and in other words, it was brother number one who was the person with the highest authority and power.
Thank you, and we will conclude our discussion of the chart here. I'm coming to the end of my questions. I want to ask you about the records that were held at your office. You explained to us in your testimony that for those telegrams which you had helped decode, that you would retain copies at your office. Could you tell us what happened with the documentation in your office in early January 1979, before the Vietnamese forces arrived?
Response. For my unit, by early 1979, January, before I left the unit, I did not even keep a single sheet of secret document. Everything was burned down. So the secret informations or documents you obtained were not the part of the documents under my supervision or responsibility.
Thank you. And Did you and your staff destroy those documents? And was that under any instruction in particular?
Response. I was the last person who left on the 7th of January 1979. At 9:30 a.m. I left. So I believed that when I left, I could never return. So I made the decision on my own accord.
Thank you. And a final topic, and this will only take a few minutes. We've discussed extensively the roles of PON and YO within the telecommunication structure. Could you tell us what happened to these people? Did they continue to work in their offices until the arrival of the Vietnamese forces?
These two, I did not know whether they remained there, and I also did not know when or if they disappeared. So, just to recap, I did not know about them.
I just want to show you one document and see whether you recognize people whose name appear in it. Your Honours, this is document IS 16.90. It's a chart, table of names, entitled From Ministry S71. I have a hard copy for the witness, and I just want to show it to him and see if we can identify two names.
Yes, you may proceed, court officer. Could you deliver the document from the prosecutor for the witness examination?
Mr. Sapang, just looking at number 8 in that list, the name is indicated as Roth Tan, alias Yo. The next column appears to be age 26, then M, presumably M for male, and then to the right of that, Chairman, Office K18, and to the far right, well, there is a date first, 11 of May 78, and to the far right, under making dossier. Is this the same individual as you, whom you've described in your testimony?
I only know that person by the name Ju. I did not know the real name of that person. And here it reads Office K18. And yes, K18 belonged to him.
Thank you. And just one more name in the same document, number 18. We have Uch Tan, alias Pon, age 30, male, Chairman, telephone office of the ministry, 4 April 78, and to the far right, under interrogation. Is that the PON that we have been discussing over the last few days?
I do not know the real name of PON. However, by looking at the gender and the age and the status, that is the chairperson of the telephone office, in fact, PON was in charge of all the telephones in Phnom Penh, and he was also above me. I am uncertain it could be him, because here there is no photo of him. And it is also unclear to me when it reads the telephone office of the ministry. If it reads out that he was in charge of the confidential messages for Pol Pot, then it will be clearer to me. So this status is rather vague to me.
Thank you, Mr. Nonsapang. I have no further questions for you. I wish to thank you sincerely on behalf of the Office of the Co-Prosecutors for coming here to testify and for giving such detailed accounts of your experiences. Your Honours, thank you for the time allocated to us, and with your leave, we will hand the floor over to the civil party lawyers.
Thank you. The floor is now given to the lead co-lawyers for civil parties to put the question to this witness. Good morning, Mr. President, Your Honours. The assigned civil party lawyers are Tisrina and her international counterpart. Yes, you may proceed. Tisrina. Good morning, Mr. President, Your Honours. Good morning, everyone in and around the courtroom. My name is T. Srina. I am a civil party lawyer. And good morning, Mr. Witness. And I thank you very much for your patience to testify before this court for the last few days. I have some questions for you in order to clarify some points. And I'd like to go back a little bit in response to your testimony on the 29th August 2012. Which is related to the situation pre-1975. In your response to the prosecution, you said you met with Pol Pot and Nuon Chea at B17. My supplementary question is, at that time, when you met with Nuon Chea and Pol Pot, how many times did you meet them? Response. At B17, I did not directly meet with them or chatted with them. I saw Pol Pot and Nuon Chea, who walked past me while they were inspecting the work that my group did. When they walked past, I in fact did not recognize them because I was new. And after they left, I asked people as to who they were, those big build brothers. I asked for their names, and then I learned of their names, but I did not actually have a conversation with them. Thank you for your clarification. My next question is also to deal with B17. You said B17 is a refashioned or tampering site. Can you confirm that? Response. B17 is a tampering site, as I stated earlier. During the regime, in order to recruit people to work on a specific task, and as my social status was reviewed, as I was in the middle class, and in order to fulfill main task of the party, I needed to be tempered, and they would see whether I could sustain the tempering that I worked in the field day and night and under the rain, and whether I could work as ordinary peasants. I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Witness. You said B17 was a tampering site before being recruited to work for the party. Can you tell us in what types of tampering were done at that B17? Response. It was not a tampering specifically for the decoding team. Before we were assigned to work on the decoding team, they would temper our stance, and not just for the decoding team. Thank you. I am clear now on this issue. Now I move on to the post-75 situation. You said that when you arrived in Phnom Penh, you were in charge of decoding the message about the victory of the Communist Party of Cambodia. My question is, did you ever come across telegrams talking about the measure taken against the Tribunal or the Tribunal enemy after the victory in Phnom Penh? And if so, who were the authors of those telegrams? Response. I did not decode any telegrams concerning Tribunal. As far as I know, Tribunal already fled before the victory, before the liberation, and there was nothing in regards to Tribunal. Regarding the message of victory, the message of victory was not a confidential message. It was an open message. So you could read plain letters in that message. Counsel, my question is not about Lun Nol himself. The question is about the Lun Nol enemy, because in the CPK, they fought against the Lun Nol side in order to capture Phnom Penh. And after taking control of Phnom Penh, the question is whether inside or within the party, did they take any measure to determine who were the Lun Nol enemy and what measures to be taken against the Lun Nol enemy? Did you ever come across such telegrams or message? And if not, did you ever know about measures taken against the Lun Nol soldiers? Response: No, I did not, and I never saw that kind of message. And as you know through my statement, I was in the banana forest, and I did not actually know the real situation at the basis. As for the messages that I decoded, I never come across about the issue of what measures to be taken against the Lun Nol soldiers. Counsel, last week you stated that the incoming messages were reports and the outgoing messages were instructions, and you said that some telegrams were short coming from sectors, various sectors, to 870 committee. My question is, how many types of telegrams there were? Response: telegrams from the sector committee to the upper echelon were confidential, as they dealt with the meetings of the leading cadres with the upper echelon, and for that it was classified as confidential. During that regime, I did not see any telegrams from any sector or zone requesting to meet with the upper echelon. Counsel, my apology, maybe my question is not clear enough. The question is, during the time that you worked as the decoder, did they classify the types of telegrams? For example, a request, a sending type of a telegram that could be a report, or there were only two types of the telegrams, as I just mentioned. Response: There were open and confidential telegrams. These were the only two types. Open telegrams are just opened, talking about various victories, and that could be broadcast openly throughout the country and the world. As for the confidential telegrams or messages, they need to be encrypted on a number of layers. Counsel, you talked about confidential messages. The question is, who determined or categorized those messages as confidential? Was it your team or somebody else? Response. It is not difficult to understand. There was a principle within my team. Anybody could see which telegram or message is opened or confidential. And that's the principle that clearly distinguishes between opened and confidential messages. As for confidential messages, sometimes there was annotation by the leaders, like confidential or strictly confidential. Counsel, thank you. Based on your experience that you work as telecrime decoder, the question is, after you decode the message, they need to be sent to various recipients. The question is, after you decoded the message, was there anybody else who would verify the message that you decode, whether it was complete or not? Response. Within my team, before that message was delivered to K1, I was the one who supervised the task and the team members within my group who decode the messages. So I'm the one who actually verified it, including whether there was any spelling mistake or not before it was sent further. Counsel, you said that you would check the message after it was decoded. The question is whether the content of the decoded message really was checked in order to make sure it is consistent with the original message that was received. Response. Regarding any possible mistake or related matter, it could be PON or PON group who would come and check. So sometimes if there is a spelling mistake, PON and his group would underline it and then would give me a phone call to check. Question. Regarding certain telegrams that were shown to you by the prosecution, you also stated regarding the form of the telegram. My supplementary question is regarding the sequential number of the telegram. As I observe, the sequential number could start from 1 through 3 and so on. How the sequential number was determined, whether it has to be reset monthly or yearly, or how it was done? Response. As a general principle, telegrams did not or rarely run up to the 3-digit numbers. Normally it would run between 1 to 99. But just then I saw some telegrams running up to 200 or 300 numbers. The sequential number put by the decoding team could be from the day of the first message up to the number of that telegram. That was the case regarding that zone 1. But as a general principle, as I stated within my decoding team, when the number reached 99, it would reset to 01. Question regarding the sequential number from 01 upward. Upward to 99, and as it just said, some telegrams ran into 3 digits. And what was the difference between these two methods? Let me also continue. This form of the sequential number, and as your experience, as in regards to your experience, do you think it is acceptable to accept this or both methods? Response. The difference in the sequential number in the telegrams is okay with me. It is no difference from the telegrams that my team decoded. This particular unit, signed by the person named Sai, used a different sequential number for the telegram. It could be that he started his telegram from 01 and up to this point in time it reached 3 to 4. So this is not a major issue when it comes to the sequential number for the telegrams. Question. Let me confirm that the telegrams shown to you by the prosecutor yesterday, and in your response, you even recognize the handwriting annotation on certain telegrams. My question is, this type of telegram and its form did exist and were used during the Democratic Cambodia period. Response: yes, that is correct. The form with its heading and ending though in various units they use rather slightly different heading. For example, to 870 committee, or to beloved Onka, or to Onka 870. But the form was consistent there would be a heading section addressing to whom, and at the end of the telegram there had to be some kind of a complimentary wording, wishing victory, for instance, or with fraternity or warm fraternity, etc., etc. So this is the form, but it's slightly used differently at the various zones. But the form, the heading, and the ending are consistent. And there had to be a date and a signature of the person who made the telegram. And each telegram had to have this kind of a format. As for the middle section of the telegram, and as I already informed the chamber, it varied. There is no strict format to follow for the middle section. In principle, the telegrams had to be short but precise. So if a situation occurred, then that kind of situation would be put in short, precise form. For example, point 1 stated about this matter, point 2 stated about other matter, for instance. So the middle section of the telegram varied. Question. So to your knowledge, this kind of form of the telegram was used during the Democratic Cambodia? Response. Yes.
Counsel, thank you. With regard to the evacuation of the population from one sector to another, I have a question. You testified yesterday when the prosecutor presented document E3/16 concerning the evacuation of the population to the northwest zone. In that, you indicated that, or in that you testified, but I'm not sure whether you were aware of the population movement from the east to the northwest. Were you aware of such evacuations? Response. With regard to the telegrams concerning the population movement, I already indicated that when it comes to the evacuation of the Muslim people, it was not part of my task to decode messages concerning the transfer. And to be honest, when things happened at the bases, it was out of my knowledge. I worked only at the office. I did not know what happened to the evacuations. I did not even know what happened to the purges, and I wish not to elaborate on this. The President, thank you, Counsel, and thank you, Mr. Witness. It is now appropriate moment for the adjournment. The chamber will adjourn for 20 minutes. Court officer is now instructed to assist the witness during the break. and have him return to the courtroom when the next session resumes.
សូមអញ្ជើញក្រោកឈរ